When I was working in the film traffic unit as a film traffic supervisor, one of my duties was to chase up films for telecine area, be it transmissions, studio recordings, VT transfers, whatever. I'd have to cruise across to the programme planning office in 6th floor television centre, main block, to collect the updated telecine booking sheets to see if there were any additions that I needed to chase up. And as usual, I collected the sheets and headed back to the South Hall lift, called the lift, pressed for ground, got in the lift went down to the 2nd floor and stopped, door opened, and John Pertwee, Doctor Who at the time, got in complete with cloak and pressed 4. Going down, I said, the door's closed, the lift went up to the 4th floor. As he got out, I said, "Look, I know you're a Time Lord. You don't have to prove it." And his reply was, "I know, but it does have its advantages."
But it was about the size of a TARDIS. What year did you join the BBC?
1955, July the 11th, 1955, Line Grove Postroom.
How did you get into the BBC in the first place?
Now how did I get into the BBC?
Yes.
Well, believe it or not, I had no paper qualifications from school, and my mum was on the local council in Wembley, and she knew the education officer, and she said, "My son's coming up to 17, she said, and can you do anything?" So he got in touch with me and said, "Well, the BBC's looking for office juniors." And so got me a job in July the 11th, 1955.
So you started at Lime Grove?
That's the day I started. I reported to Broadcasting House, 5 Portland Place, and they put me in a van and sent me down to Lime Grove Postroom. And that's how it all started. I worked in Alexander Palace Film Dispatch, and I worked in Elstree. And of course, that's EastEnders country up there, but
yes.
In fact, I was there when they were actually building the EastEnders set.
Oh, were you?
Yes, when there was trolley loads of stuff going in there and everything. Elstree, of course, fascinating place. So was Alexander Palace because of the history of Alexander Palace. But I didn't get a chance to really look round there. I moved on a year or so later to the Music Library Alding House, and then from there to the Recording Programmes Unit. And then from Recording Programmes Library, I then moved to the Gramophone Library. I think that was probably about 2 years later, so it'd be about 19 whatever. After that, I then moved on to Maida Vale Transcription Unit. That was up at St Hilda's, Maida Vale, which is opposite Maida Vale Studios. Then in 1963, and I think the reason is the BBC's always tried to get square pegs in square holes, I was moved to Reading Film Dispatch and ignited a spark that hasn't gone out to this day for my loves of all things film. And working in the Film Dispatch was booking in rushes, logging films, film editors, vans going to and from Television Centre, etc., Line Grove. And then after that, I moved to regional film traffic, where I was chasing up films for the films from the regions and to and from the regions by train at first, and then they organised a trunker service, so the films from the regions were collected by van, then taken to a central depot, and then taken to various regions, Birmingham, Glasgow, Bristol, whatever, Cardiff, whatever. And then I came to the sharp end, which was film traffic supervisor. Now that is 9 till 9 on the old AP shift, and that's Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And that job is one of those, it's okay during a normal working day, you're just chasing up films for the telecine area, trying to chase up lost films, whatever. Once you get past 5:30 in the evening and at weekends, anything can happen and probably will. I think my favourite was one Saturday afternoon. I had a phone call from Telecine about a transmission film that was going out that evening, and they said, "Neville, we've got a problem." And I said, "What's that?" They said, "Well, you know the film such and such." I said, "Yes, you've got it. It says here, received." He said, "Oh, I know we've got the film," he said, "but the picture's okay, but according to the mag track, it's a completely different mag track for the transmission."
Should explain that the sound is on a different roll of film covered in some sort of magnetic coating. It's called the set mag track, and that's kept usually in the same tin as the picture.
Yeah.
But obviously this had gone wrong.
So I said, give me the number of the film that you've got, and I'll phone Brentford, hoping that the mag track, it had been a straight swap. Fortunately, I phoned up Brentford, and I gave them the number of the track at the end of the leader, and the girl disappeared. And of course, in a situation like that, it seems ages and ages before anything happens. But in fact, it was probably only 2 or 3 minutes when she phoned back and said, yes, it's all right, the track is in the other can. So I organised a taxi to take it up to the television centre and got my clerk in Film Dispatch to deliver it. But the thing is, weekends, you have to be prepared for anything. And I do mean anything. One Sunday morning, I was annoyed because I was just settling down to listen to the Archers. And I got a phone call. A voice said, because I must point out here that I've had a direct line in, a DDI line, which means someone phoning from outside can go straight through to my office rather than going through the switchboard. And the DDI line phone flashed. So immediately, instead of just saying film traffic, as I normally would, I said BBC Film Traffic. And the voice said, Neville? And I said, yes. He said, it's Basil Harris here, a filming regiment. He said, we've got a problem, we bust our tape recorder. So I said, OK. So I said, you need another tape recorder? He said, yes, please. So I took down the details, the sort of model they required, and any additional whatever. And so then I phoned the film operations manager, who was responsible for the drama series and serials, and he said, OK, he said, I'll organise that. He said, you organise the flight. So I said, OK. So I phoned our skipping office at Heathrow, and I said, well, Neville here, we're going to have a package for Cyprus. Can you let me know when the next possible flight is? And he said, well, I don't know how things are progressing. I said, well, I should have details in a few minutes. And by then I got a phone call back from the film operations manager, and he gave me the details for the weight and value, which I then relayed to shipping. Meanwhile, with my left foot, as I describe it, I was booking a taxi to pick the stuff up from the Endell Street, Better Sound, and with my other foot I was typing out labels, Basil Harris, BBC Film Unit, care of Nickerson Airport to be called for. And as I say, I phoned shipping, and they gave me the waybill number, which I then put onto the label as well, and the flight number. And then I had a phone call from downstairs about half an hour later saying the taxi was downstairs, go down, stick the labels on. Taxi goes off to Heathrow. I then phoned up the telex unit in Broadcasting House and asked them to send a telex out to Basil Harris, giving him the flight details, waybill number, etc. And then basically went back to sleep again. But as I said, the film traffic is a sort of, the buck stops here, like Ronald Reagan would say. And on another occasion, I think this is my favourite actually, had a phone call one Saturday afternoon from David Ziegler, another film operating manager. He said, Neville, I've got a problem. I said, what's that? He said, I just had a phone call from the laboratories, and they tell me that the last batch of rushes from a film crew is fogging. Now, we know it's not the camera, so there's a fault on the film stock. So we need to replace film stock up to the camera crew, replacement, and let them know. So I said, OK, where are they? So he said, Chesterfield. I said, where? He said, good luck, Neville. And that is why I describe unpaid sixpence a week. This is where you use your noddle. And so I phoned up the local police in Chesterfield City Police, and phoned up, and I said, it's BBC Television in London here. I need to trace the film crew rather urgently. Have you got any film crews operating, any paperwork regarding BBC film crews? So they said they'd phone me back. They phoned me back and they said, well, I'm sorry, we've been in touch with our mobiles and there's no paperwork, and none of our mobiles have seen any film crews, because I was banking on the fact they were on a public highway. Instead of filming on a public highway, they must have police permission. Right, so that's one down. So my next stop is to find the pied à terre number, and that would be in the film operations manager's office over in Woodstock Grove. So I phoned PBX and said, it's Neville here, I'm just going to disappear. So I went over to Woodstock Grove and got the keys from the reception, having a cutting room pass, which also gives me access to offices, the film department offices, and went into the office of David Ziegler and got the pied à terre number. went back to television centre, tried the number and had no answer. So I phoned David and I said, look, I've no answer at the moment, I'll try first thing in the morning. So Sunday morning, back into the office, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and if you believe that, you'll believe anything. And so I phoned the number and the lady answered. I said, can I speak to Peter Bartlett, BBC Film Crew, please? So she said, just a minute, and they came on the line. I said, good morning, Peter, it's Neville. And he said, Neville Film Traffic. I said, Neville Film Traffic. So I said, look, it's like this, Peter, and I told him what had happened. So I then diplomatically held the phone a few inches from my ear.
Well, what did he say about his film being full?
He was not a very happy bunny about that, obviously, because fortunately they weren't using any actors, so they were able to, get away with a reshoot, just location sort of thing. And
Right.
that was okay. As I say, that's why I held the phone diplomatic, because I knew he wouldn't be very happy bunny about that. And then he came and I said, how much film stock do you need for replacement? So he had a word with his assistant and told me how much. I said, right, now important, what's the batch number of the film stock you're using? So he gave me the batch number. So I then phoned PBX. I said, it's Neville here, I'm going down to Wheeling Studios. I'll give you a bell when I get there. Got down to my little car, drove down to Wheeling, got the keys to Film Dispatch, and then I went across to John Mann, who the film stock store, which is open 7 days a week, even on Saturdays and Sundays, and I went in, I explained the situation to him, giving him the batch number of the film stock, and of course the programme number, because I needed to draw the equivalent amount of film stock that we needed. So I gave him the batch number that he had to withdraw. Obviously, all that batch number had to be withdrawn. Then I got the batch number and I went back to Film Dispatch, packed it up, wrote out the Red Star film forms for the British Rail, and Red Star means station to station direct. So I looked up a train for Chesterfield, which would have been about an hour and a quarter from the time it was then. So I then organised a taxi, phoned Chesterfield again to let them know what was happening and what train it would be on. Phoned PBX at Television Centre, and I said, it's Neville here, I'm just leaving, I'll be back in about 20 minutes, half an hour. So I got back in my little car, having waited for the parcel to be picked up by the taxi, which I'd ordered, obviously, and then went back to TV Centre, back into my office, phoned PBX and said, it's Neville here, anything happening, all quiet on the Western Front. And then, as I say, basically back to sleep again. But my favourite story about the letters BBC, one Sunday morning I had a phone call from a film operations manager. He said, oh, Neville, can you phone, they gave me the nearest cameraman, and phone him up and tell him the location tomorrow has been cancelled, and will he phone me, please? And in the office we had a blue book, nothing to do with Max Miller, which gives the list of cameramen, film recorders, everyone who's associated with film, even me, the famous Neville. And so I phoned this number, the lady answered, and I said, go on, speak to whoever it was. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, he's gone down to his club for a drink. So I said, oh, can you give me the number? Look, it's rather urgent. So she gave me the number, I phoned up, and the voice the other end, hello, friendly. So I said, oh, can I speak to, who wants him? BBC Television London here. Oh, just a moment, sir, I'll see if I can find him for you. But I say, I loved the work in Film Traffic. It was a case of Saturday mornings, you never knew what was going to happen in the next 12 hours, and probably would, and you had to cope.
Now tell me about Lime Grove, because I worked at Lime Grove for a while.
Yes.
And it was the most extraordinary place.
Lime Grove, I was in the postroom first of all. The postroom, when I first got there, 1955, was tucked away behind the dispatch. And it was a little tiny office, and to say you couldn't swing a cat, I don't think you could actually swing a kitten. And then they moved the office to next door to Cashiers, which, no, we weren't trying to get the money. But I think the funniest thing was when I came down one day, going back to the postroom, and there was a girl with some clothes on the ground, and she was walking all over them. And I wonder what she's doing. She's on giving them an aged look. She said they need to look dirty for a film. But I'll tell you what, it just shows what a gentleman Richard Dimbleby was. I had the pleasure of having lunch with Richard Dimbleby in the club at Lion Grove quite often. And on one occasion, I was in the Film Dispatch, this happened, at Lion Grove, which is in Smith's Yard. And I got up to the corridor that runs down to the reception, and Richard Dimbleby and Paul Fox were coming up the corridor. And I don't know if you know Smith's Yard, the corridor, but it's not very wide. And Paul Fox and Richard Dimbleby weren't exactly minuscule. So I thought, well, I'll wait at the end of the corridor and then open the door, because there's no point in trying to get past them. So as they came up to the door, I opened it, and Richard Dimbleby broke off in mid-conversation and said, "Thank you, Neville," and walked on. And I thought, now that is what you call a gentleman. And then, of course, Lion Grove Film Dispatch was interesting because I've had my first experience of nitrate film. Now, anyone who doesn't know about nitrate film, to say it is volatile would be the understatement of the year, because I'd heard about nitrate and I was chatting to a fireman who happened to be there, and I said, "What is it about nitrate film?" And he said, "Well, put it this way, Neville," he said, "have you got a can handy?" And I said, "Well, actually, I'm taking one up to the vault now." So he said, "Well, that's a steel-lined vault at the top of the east block at Lion Grove." And he said, "OK," he said, so I opened the can, he snipped off about 1 inch, less than an inch from the beginning of the leader, right at the beginning of the film, just about 1 inch of film. Now remember that, 1 inch. And I took the film up to the vault and came back, and he'd put the 1 inch of film in an empty film can. And he said, "Now watch." And he put a match to it, and there was a white flare, and that was just 1 inch of film. And if you can think what 1,000 feet would have done, absolutely, what sort of damage that would have done.
Yes.
That is why when they were if it was being transferred in Telecine 2 or viewed in Theatre 4 at Lion Grove, firemen had to be on standby at both occasions.
Absolutely. Dangerous stuff, really dangerous stuff.
Actually, I got to meet Sylvia Peters, Mary MacDonald, and Macdonald Hobley. That's right, Macdonald Hobley. And of course, over the years, while I was there at Television Centre and Lion Grove and Ealing Studios, I got to meet quite a lot of people, well-known people, and they're just normal people. And I mean, as I say, I had lunch with Richard Dimbleby, and when I was at Television Centre, I sometimes had lunch with the Heidi High gang, and that was fun. And then on one occasion, I was sitting at the next table to the Good Life cast, and my mum wanted to be introduced them, so I introduced, had a chat to Penelope Keats, and I met Ronnie Barker a couple of times. Well, he's a lovely man, he really was, and I said funny. I was helping on Children in Need on one occasion, and Ronnie Barker came along. They was recording 2 Ronnies in the next studio to Children in Need. Ronnie Barker was wearing a very nice check jacket, grey slacks, and a very loud tie. I went, "Ouch!" He said, "It's a bit loud, Neville." I said, "It is indeed, Ronnie. Yes, it is." I mean, for instance, Terry Wogan. I met Terry Wogan a couple of times. And on one occasion, again, Children in Need. And in the morning, he'd said on his radio programme that he was having 2 weeks off to paint the kitchen to match the budgie. So I happened to see him, again, I was helping on Children in Need. And I said, "Terry, this morning you said you were having 2 weeks off to paint the kitchen to match the budgie." He said, "That's right." I said, "Terry, what would happen if the budgie escaped from its cage?" "I'll have to respray the budgie." But Terry Wogan, when he died, I don't think one person had a bad word for him. He was loved, and I think that's the right word. He was loved by everybody because he was such a kind, laid-back person. And over the years, I met all these celebrities: Ken Dodd, Michael Benteen, Dad's Army. In fact, I met Clive Dunn.
What was Clive Dunn like?
Clive Dunn was quite young, actually. He was much younger than... obviously, it was very good makeup. And the only problem is, he said, that more programmes we do, the closer I get to Corporal Jones instead. Getting back to Terry Wogan, I'll tell you a funny thing. I used to wake up at 7 o'clock and I don't know why, but my brain seemed to switch on at 7 o'clock in the morning. One morning I opened my eye and looked at the clock and it said 7:10, 10 past 7. Anyway, at the time, it didn't worry me. I didn't start work till 9 and, do my ablutions, have my breakfast, etc. I used to get into the office about 8:15, but on this morning I got in about 10 to 9. But on the way in, this is the funny thing, on the way in I was listening to Terry Wogan, as was my wont, and he said, and at 8 o'clock we have James Alexander Gordon, and this time I hope we have the Pips. And I thought, that's it. My brain must have been tuned to the Pips at 7 o'clock. But because the Pips weren't there, my brain didn't switch on.
Subconsciously you heard them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that woke you up. That's a good story.
I saw Gordon Kay just after he'd had his accident when they started filming Hello, Hello again. And the canteen on the first floor was quite full, and there was a seat at Gordon Kay's table. I said, can I... Lewis sat down, we got chatting, and he asked what I did, and I told him, worked in film traffic, etc. He said, what's that? And I told him. And I said, it's normal people. And, Harry Seacombe, I met Harry Seacombe at Ealing Studios, and I was talking to the commissioner about Harry Seacombe, and he said, Harry's lovely, he said, because... the other day, when he was filming, he gave me £5 bob for letting him park his car in Ealing Studios. And the following day, he drove off and he didn't waver. And then the following day, he stopped the car, got out, gave me another £5 bob, and he said, sorry, got back in the car and drove off. You read about these people, you don't realise what they really like.
Did you meet Spike Milligan?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Tell me about him. What was Spike Milligan like?
I've only met Spike Milligan once. And that was when I was a member of the Studio Amateur Dramatic Group, and he was a guest.
Oh.
And he was quite normal, actually, which surprised me. Although when I asked for his autograph, he signed Spike Maligna, the well-known printing error. Not a lot of people know that, as Michael Caine would say. That on his grave, it says, I told you I was ill. I'll tell you what the nicest thing anyone ever said to me. I think this was really funny. I had a friend of mine over from Australia, a distant cousin from Australia, and she was a fan of Val Doonican. So I said, I'll get tickets for his show. So I phoned up the production office and I said, it's Neville in Film Traffic. Any chance for a couple of seats for Val Doonican next week? And she said, Neville, even for you we haven't got any tickets. And I thought, even for you we haven't got any tickets was the nicest thing anyone ever said.
So you were known as the famous Neville.
I was known as the famous Neville. This goes back, this is an interesting thing, this famous Neville. What happened was I was in regional film traffic, and one morning the phone rang and I said, regional film traffic, good morning. And the boy said, is that famous Neville? And this was Fred Frost, who at the time was in charge of the film dispatch at Kay's Laboratories, Kay's Film Try again, Neville, restrain your tongue. Kay's Film Processing Laboratories in Finsbury Park. And I said, if you say so, Fred, thinking no more about it, you see. Half an hour later, the phone rang, and I said, good morning, regional film traffic. The boy said, can I speak to Mr. Neville Withers, please? So I said, speaking. This is Pan American Airlines Prestwick. I wonder if you can help us. And I thought, God, I must be famous. And that's how the famous Neville came about. And and I point out to people, it's not me being big-headed.
Did you have anything to do with radio?
When I was in Gramophone Library, I used to take records across to the continuity unit at Broadcasting House. And of course, another part of my job was also to go down to various record stores and collect records. And the funny thing was, My Fair Lady, when it was on the London stage, everybody wanted to draw the LP out from the library, and we kept running out. And I remember one occasion, about 4:30 in the afternoon, I was called to the office. He said, "Oh, Neville," he said, "we need another copy of RBL 1000, My Fair Lady." He said, "We've had a cri de coeur from someone and they need a copy. You go down to the HMV and collect one, please." I've been in touch with them. But of course, by the time the fuss was over, we had about 20 copies of My Fair Lady on me. But I was, apart from being in Studio Amateur Dramatic Group, which was fascinating because learnt all about, echo chambers, little tips like if you're pouring a glass of water in a play, you should put a little drop of water in first, because the first few seconds you don't hear anything, but if you put a few drops of water in the bottom of the glass, when you start pouring, immediately you hear the... And of course, talking of SAG, Studio Amateur Dramatic Group, did you know that one of the studios at Broadcasting House is between the Bakerloo lines? And this was proved by we went into one evening, we were, doing the usual thing, and the person who was running Studio Amateur Dramatic Group said, "I want to show you something," he said. So I think we were probably down sub-basement or sub-basement. They all went into the control room, and they turned all the microphones in the studio up to full. And after a few moments, you saw the little needles pulsating and getting more and more as the train went by. Of course, the thing was, when people are in the studio, you never even noticed that, but because the studio was empty and all the microphones were turned up to full, you picked up the sound of the underground train. So, as I say, I had a lovely time in the BBC, but unfortunately, once the BBC started going downhill when John Burt arrived, things just got, they started going downhill right, left and centre. And in the old days, going back, if I missed a programme on television, I'd phone up Film Library and they'd send me a VHS copy, which I could view at home and then send back to them. But or phone the production office and the same thing. And once John Burt came along, when I phoned up an office, they said, "Well, I'm sorry, Neville, we've got to account for all our money now, and I can't do it, I'm sorry." Yeah. And 37 and a half years I've worked with the BBC, but as I say, once it started going downhill, and I got offered redundancy in 1991, right. And I showed the figures to a friend of mine who's a personal friend, and he looked at the figures, he said, "How old are you?" And I said, 54, and he said, "Not at the moment, wait till the figures are better." So halfway through 1992, I got a revised redundancy figures, which I showed to this friend of mine, and he said, "Neville, you'd be a bloody fool not to take the money." So December the 31st, 1992, yours truly left Ealing Studios. And the reason I say Ealing Studios is because Film Traffic was wound up for two reasons. First of all, there were films were transmitted on videotape, and there was hardly any need for Film Traffic. Secondly, what happened was that we had a diary, office diary, which we kept for any major incident, like chasing somebody out to crew in Cyprus, or, as I say, going down sorting out the film stock, whatever, would go in the diary. But sometimes these things wouldn't crop up for 10, 14, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks. And what happened was that what we weren't putting in there was a phone call, like, say, from Telecine, saying they hadn't got the title of the two Ronnies or something, so I'd go to the cutting room and get the title of the two Ronnies, take them over to the Telecine. And but we weren't putting things like that in, so somebody from them upstairs came along, looked at the diary and saw these gaps, as I say, about 2 or 3 weeks with nothing happening, and thought we weren't cost effective. And that is why Film Traffic was run down. And I even sent a letter to the people concerned who, I said, I have memos, thank God for film traffic. Film traffic saved the day again,
Yes.
in block letters, again. And but unfortunately, them upstairs weren't interested, and film traffic was no more. In fact, they moved us from East Tower. What really annoyed me, they moved me down to the basement in the videotape area, where we were just chasing up programmes for studio recordings and VT transfers, and working 9:30, 5:30, 5 days a week. And I tried to explain to them upstairs that at weekends and in the evenings, film traffic is a central point of of contact, and we have to be there. But no, them upstairs weren't interested. Yeah, video library. I was working the video, like the video version of film traffic, chasing up videotapes, making sure they get to transmission area. And this is something you reminded me. Talk about video library, videotape library. People were walking off with, videos were going missing, not videotapes, the main tapes, but VHS tapes were going walkies from the library. So it was decided to put security doors, so you could only get in if you had an electronic tag. However, this was done, but along came the fire service and said, no, you can't do that. You've got to have one of those doors open in case there's a fire. So on the one hand, we want to secure the tapes. On the other hand, the fire service, no, you've got to have one door that's open all the time. Oh dear, you can't win.
No.
So they, I wouldn't take redundancy. I had to go back to working in Film Dispatch. I was working down at Ealing Studios in December 1992 when I left.
That was around the time, of course, that Producer Choice came in, and you say the place began to deteriorate.
Exactly. What happened was that, for instance, to give you an idea of what happened, in the old days, you could go into the reference library and you could look at the newspapers or, check on a book or something. And I was told, I was sat in the canteen to somebody one lunchtime and they said, oh, Neville, do you heard the latest? I said, no. He said, if you go into the reference library and want to look at the newspaper, it costs you £5 to your department. I said, what? He said, £5 to your department. I said, that's ridiculous. He said, I know, it's all to do with John Burt. On the lift, I noticed on the way home one evening from work, somebody had written above the lift doors, John Burt must go for all our sake. And I thought, in the good old days, as far as we were concerned, the DG was up there, we were down there, and never the twain. But once John Burt came along and started putting his nose in, that was the end. And I'm not the only one. A lot of people agree with me that the BBC is not what it was. I wrote to a producer about a programme where he had a drama and they'd used music with heavy visuals. Now, as far as I'm concerned, my love of filmmaking, if the visuals are strong enough, you do not need music. So I wrote to the producer and I said, as far as I'm concerned, it didn't work. And I had a lovely letter back from him and he said, Neville, it was an experiment and I agree with you, it didn't work. And he finished up by saying, the BBC isn't what it was and never will be again.
Well, that's very sad.
It is.
It is. Sad. Yes.
So they, I wouldn't take redundancy. I had to go back to working in Film Dispatch. I was working down at Ealing Studios in December 1992 when I left. All in all, my 37 years in the film, in the BBC. I was lucky to work the good old days, the big golden age of television, 1965, 70, 75, 80, the golden years.
Neville, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I hope you've enjoyed talking to.
Oh, I have.
About your career.
Oh, it's brought back a lot of memories.
That's exactly what we want.